Welcome back. Here we are another day. We're talking standard form today. The following is the graph of y equals x squared minus 8x plus 6. What is the x coordinate of the vertex? Remember, okay? The vertex is the coordinate where it starts changing directions, okay? So that's going to be down here, which in our case, let's see, it's 4 to the right and 10 down. So that'd be 4, -10. That's our x coordinate. Now, we've kind of talked about the shape of normal quadratics. So when we're looking for the next dots, let's kind of see. Here's another point of intersection, which that's up 1, over 1, both directions. Then it goes up 1, 2, 3. I'm having a hard time seeing this. Is pretty faint. 1, 2, 3 over 1. So it went up by 1, then it went up by 3, then it's going to go up by 5 over 1. And then keeping that pattern going, so it went up 1 over 1, up 3 over 1, up 5 over 1, so it's going up by the next consecutive odd number. And it'll go up 7 over 1. Oops. And it'll keep following that path. So let's see, do I need, and this is they're the same distance from the center, and that's because the center of this graph, the vertex, remember, splits it at the axis of symmetry. The A-O-S. Yeah! Woohoo! All right, cool. Now this graph is negative x squared plus 2x plus 7. So what's different about this graph compared to the first one? Well, it's an upside down parabola. And why is that? Well, it's because A is negative, right? So A is negative. Which means it's reflective. So vertex form, we used A, H, and K for our transformations. This one, we're going to kind of just keep it in order, just like when we were doing the quadratic formula back in Algebra 1, maybe even geometry. A is whatever's in front of your x squared, B is whatever's in front of your regular x, and C is the one that is just your normal number. It doesn't have a variable behind it. So we will eventually need, especially A and B, in a little bit here. What is the x coordinate of the vertex? Let me move up here. So our vertex on this one is 1 to the right and 5, 6, 7, 8. So it's at 1, 8. So let's see, what else do I need to remind you of here? So here's a pretty important formula that we're eventually going to need. This is how you determine the axis of symmetry. So the AOS formula is going to be x equals the opposite of b over 2a. And you use this quite a bit. So if you were just given the equation and they said, okay, graph it, this is going to be your first step to find the axis of symmetry. So in our case, the opposite of b is 2, so we'll have the opposite of 2 over 2 times a, and a is -1. So this becomes -2 over -2, which is +1. So our axis of symmetry would be at x equals 1, which we can see that from the graph. But again, this would be the first step if they just gave us the equation and they told us to graph it, which I think we have to do on the back side. Yeah, so that'll be our first step when we get to the back side of this notes paper. The following is a graph of 1/2 x squared minus x minus 6. What's different about this graph compared to the first and second ones? Why do you think this is so? Well, it's wider. And why do we think that is? Because we have a compression. Compressed by 1/2. Right? Because that's the number in front of the x squared. So it follows that same stretch compression rule that we had in vertex form. So that handles that question. I always worry that I'm going to forget to tell you guys something that I know is important. So if we did have to figure out A, B, and C, A would be 1/2, B would be the -1, right? There's a 1 in front of that x, and C would be -6. And again, we don't need those necessarily now, but we will when we do have to graph it. What is the x-coordinate of the vertex? Okay, it looks like it's at 1. And it appears to be like -6.5. All they're asking for is the x-coordinate. But we can figure out the y-coordinate by substituting that in for x. 1 squared is 1, half of 1 is 1/2, minus x, which is 1 minus 6. 1/2 minus 1 is -1/2, minus 6 is -6.5. So that would be our y-coordinate. They didn't ask us for it. We're just good like that, you know what I mean? You know what I mean. All right, let's flip it over to the back. Now, I told you the axis of symmetry formula, which we will need here in a moment. The opposite of B over 2A. After you find that, that gives you the x-coordinate of the vertex, and then you need to figure out the y. So what you do is you take whatever you get for x, put it back into the equation, and you solve it for y. So the way that's written very formally is the coordinate of the vertex. The x-coordinate is the -b over 2a, and the y-coordinate would be a function of that, meaning you're substituting that back into the equation. So we write f of -b over 2. That's very formal. Very formal. And you know me. Yes. Hold on, my monocle's in the way. We're back. The following is the graph of y equals 3x squared minus 6x plus 1. What's different about the graph compared to the ones on the front page? Why do you think this is so? Well, this is skinnier. It's thinner. Which, what does that mean in a parabola? That means it was stretched. And again, we can tell that just from the formula. It's stretched by a factor of 3. Now remember on the front how I was like, oh, well, once you find that vertex, it's up 1 over 1 to the next point. If it's stretched by a factor of 3, you just multiply that 1 by 3 to be up 3 over 1. And then it went up 3 the last time, so 3 times 3 would be 9. So you could go up 3 over 1, up 9 over 1, and then 5 times 3 would be 15, so up 15 over 1. That's going to be a huge graph. What is the x-coordinate of the vertex? The x-coordinate is 1. That's all it asks for. I'm going to make sure. Now let's go ahead and just find the whole vertex. So if we substitute in 1 here, y is equal to 3 times 1 squared minus 6 times 1 plus 1. 1 squared is 1 times 3 is 3. 6 times 1 is 6. And then left to right, 3 minus 6 is -3 plus 1 is -2. So our y-coordinate is -2. Finally, we get to graph it. Oh my goodness. What key characteristics should your graph have? Okay, first thing I notice is anytime you have just that standard number at the back, that's going to be our y-intercept. So it's going to cross the y-axis at -2. What else can we tell? We're going to figure out the axis of symmetry here. Let's that in black. So let's see, A is -2, B is 6, and C is -2. So calculating the axis of symmetry, it's x equals the opposite of b. B is 6 over 2 times a. A is -2. So we get -6 over -4, which comes out to positive 1.5. Ooh, that's a fun one. So that at 1.5 is going to split our graph right down the middle. So I like to draw a dashed line just so I remember if I plot something on the right, I can plot it over on the left as well. So let's see, 1.5. Now we need to find the vertex. So that's where we substitute this 1.5 in. So y equals -2 times 1.5 squared. Oh boy, might need to grab a calculator here. 6 times 1.5 minus 2. 1.5 squared is 2.25. I do know that. Let's see. -2 times 2.25 is -4.5. That makes sense. 6 times 1.5 is 9. -4.5 plus 9 is 4.5. Minus 2 is 2.5. So our x of the vertex was 1.5. Our y of the vertex was 2.5. Great. So we find that point, 1.5, 2.5. There's our vertex. What else can we see that it's reflected? Reflected, because it's -a. It's also stretched by a factor of 2. Now, if we know the y-intercept is at -2, it's right down here, we can reflect that point using the axis of symmetry. So that point is 1.5 away from the axis of symmetry. So we can reflect it 1.5 the other direction and not have to do the math for it. So that coordinate would be 1, 2, 3, 2.5. This one was the 0, 2.5. -2.5. And then this coordinate or vertex was at 1.5, 2.5. So we have enough points to draw our parabola at this point. And there we go. That was a pretty tough one. I don't like the ones with decimals. They get a little shaky. From 2000 to 2006, the consumption of poultry per capita is modeled by this formula, where t equals 0 corresponds to the year 2000. During what year was the consumption of poultry per capita at its maximum? Now think about, this is a reflected parabola. So we're looking for the absolute maximum, right? So the way we can figure that out is we got to do our vertex formula to find our axis of symmetry. So our AOS, right, because that'll give us the x coordinate of the vertex. So x equals the opposite of b, which is 2.615, over 2 times a, which is negative, I can't even read it on the board, negative point, I wasn't sure if that was the best, 2125. So if we evaluate this, 2 times negative 0.2125 is negative 0.424050. And then the numerator, the negative 2.615 divided by that will come out to 6.153. So these are years, right? Year 0 was the year 2000. So this is like 6.1 years later. So that would be during 2006. So that's great. So it's during the year 2006. That's all they're asking for here. Let's pretend like we can't hear the announcements just so I don't have to re-record this. So I'll just tell you guys a joke. Do you know what the pirate said when he turned 80 years old? He said, "I'm 80." Let's see. Okay. And we're back. So did we even need any other information? Oh, this is just kind of sum up. Cool. All right. That's it. I could have stopped it a minute ago.